Hi, I'm Mike Sigmund. This videotape is about taiji forms in general and in specifics the way they're done using what's known as internal strength. Most forms in all the martial arts have to do with applications. Initially, there were no forms. A particular fighting style in the martial arts would have some fairly neat applications that they would practice over and over again, and then gradually over a period of time these were linked in a sequence which became the form that was inherent to that particular style of martial art. Now, in most cases, how you do the form in terms of the application has certain parameters, but nowhere near the specifics that the internal strength martial arts must be done with. The internal strength martial arts, such as taiji, xingyi, bagua, liaho bafa, wuji chuan, tai shui, whatever, there's a lot of them, all have in common a particular way of moving the body which is actually very different from the way the body is moved normally. So the techniques themselves are very good in most cases, but primary to the particular martial art is how the body is moved. Secondary is the techniques. Okay, what is internal strength? It's very difficult to define internal strength into exactly one category. What we'll be dealing with will be strictly the physical parameters. In addition to the physical parameters, there will be things such as the overall body health, chi flow, so forth and so on. This particular form of strength is mechanically very, very efficient. As you become more and more skilled in it, it becomes more powerful, and that skill in the technique and usage of internal strength increases quite a bit as you get older, rather than actually atrophying and beginning to deteriorate as you get older as happens in normal strength. Okay, now currently, particularly in the United States, but all over the world, most of the internal strength forms are practiced without much attention being paid to this particular way of moving. So we will be dealing quite a bit with exactly how the movements go. The way that they are taught nowadays without the vestiges of that strength makes it very difficult sometimes for somebody to convert. So try to pay attention to how this is done. If it's applicable in what you're doing, use it. Begin to incorporate it. There's an old saying in taiji particularly that taiji is easy to learn but very difficult to correct, and that's very true. So if you're going to go back and use some of these techniques, go very slowly. Learn to repattern the body to incorporate those, and take your time. It does take time. Okay, on the first tape that we did, which a lot of the material in this tape refers back to, a lot of gross, exaggerated movements were used, and we'll do exactly the same thing in this tape. The movements will be highly exaggerated and gross, and then we'll see how it evolves from there. Okay, now in the martial art itself and what the form is used to practice, there are factors other than just this internal strength. Of course, there's neutralizing and some of the techniques which are specific to taiji, so forth, that are quite good, and we won't be dealing with those either. Okay, but most of us are not training to be fighters anyway. We are training to get this form of internal strength to help our day-to-day life. It helps in conjunction with the qigongs, which sometimes we practice on the side or with the taiji. But this basic strength is something we're looking for, and that's what will be mainly dealt with during the tape itself. Okay, let's take a quick look at the history of taiji very quickly. Most of the taiji itself did not start until the 1600s. Filtering into taiji, starting with this, the 1600s, and this now, filtering into taiji was known and acknowledged at the time were techniques and approaches from actually many other different martial arts of the time. Okay, and from this Chen style, which is actually considered the parent of all the other taiji forms, we have the main offshoot in the world today, the Yang style, which was learned from the Chen family and then propagated through the Yang family until today. There is a form early on that was developed by Wu Yushang, who studied with Yang Luchan, and he also learned a form of the Chen style taiji at Jiaobao village, but that's still a part of the Qin form itself, and that's developed on till today. There's a form that was known as the Wu style, which is made popular by Wu Zhenqian, but essentially it comes straight out of the Yang lineage itself. And then last but not least of the traditional forms that are recognized today is the Sun style. But the Sun style is actually a Yang style derivative which incorporates Xingyi and Bagua. So in this case, it synthesizes several martial arts which are not really Tai Chi. So in many cases, we won't be discussing the Sun style because of those elements which involve Xingyi and Bagua. Okay? So with that in mind, we will take a look at most of the techniques and so forth, beginning with Qin style, then look at Yang, maybe a little bit at the Wu Yuxiang style, which is now a lot of times called the Hao family style, Wu style, and that will be it. But then last but not least, since there is a style which is very popular in the United States, which was originated by Cheng Manjing, we'll take a quick look at that also. Now within the history of taiji, sometimes there's an indication that there's a precursor known as Changsan Feng. However, there's no really written or provable historical data to back that up, so we'll ignore that for the moment. Secondly, within the Yang records, particularly in the Wu Yuxiang style also, there's an indication of a man named Wang Tsungyue, but again, there's some question as to the credibility of that. Some say yes, some say no, so we'll ignore that and not go back any further. We'll just consider everything as originating from the Qin style. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and move on. In the first videotape that I did on basic building blocks for internal strength, I covered the two basic parameters that we're looking at in terms, in my opinion, the easiest ways which to get an idea, a feel, an understanding in which to begin developing internal strength. In this video, we can't cover it in quite the depth that we did in the first one, so my recommendation is if you get a chance to look at the first one, please do so. Okay, the first building block, and probably one of the most major one, is referred to as Peng or Pengjing, in the sense that the Jing in this case is like a ground vector coming from the ground up through the body and is expressed normally in the arms or what have you, and is actually controlled in the way it's expressed by moving the waist. Peng is also referred to as the substantial aspect of strength, as opposed to insubstantial, in which case if there is no Peng directed through your body to a particular limb, then the limb that doesn't have Peng strength in it is insubstantial. Sometimes you hear a reference made to cotton-covered iron, and this is a fairly good description in the sense that within taiji or the internal arts, you should have a very soft, relaxed body, and you're using Peng within that soft, relaxed body, and yet somebody touching or feeling that or an expression of the energy from it, it feels very hard to them, and yet you may be very soft. We'll go into that in a second. Also, sometimes it's referred to as being full as opposed to being empty. In other words, the arm or what have you, the portion of your chest, it could be anything, your head, wherever the Peng is directed is full, wherever it is not is empty. Okay, Peng is considered the concealed strength within taiji for this very reason. Okay, when we look at directing strength through the body, essentially what we have to do is use the skeletal frame, the joints themselves and the angles of the body to direct and take a horizontal, let's say, incoming force and change it into a vertical component. So in essence, as I push on Kim Furry, who's helping me here, I push, and my horizontal push to her is taken, curved around, and goes down her back leg. Okay. Now, she helps this process by lining her skeletal frame up so that it accepts the push like this without her having to extend any force back toward me. And yet, even though I feel like a very solid resistance is there in front of me, she's very loose. Kim, if she can move, okay, and she can move her whole body, and yet to me, it feels very solid. Now, in this helping this converting of this push into a vertical component, she's very mildly hyperextended her shoulder so that when I push here, the force goes up the arm bone, and then by very mildly rolling her shoulder forward, she brings the scapula against the back of the thorax fairly flatly so that she can bring the force from this point on her shoulder to her back, and then from her back, obviously there's bones, there's no problem following the direction that this takes down to the hip bone and down through the back leg. Now, to just stand there is fine, but within the taiji forms, we're going to have to learn to use this particular force, what have you, while we're moving. So to practice with this mobily is a good portion of what a taiji form is about. Okay, so essentially, she can direct this where she wants it. It can be here. If she stands up, I can push maybe here, and she, in this case, directs my incoming force down to her leg through her body. So directing where this force vector goes with your mind is one of the very common aspects of Jing, Pengjing itself. So this sort of length strength that we call Pengjing is very critical. Obviously, this can be looked at in terms of normal day-to-day physics also. When I'm pushing against Kim, if she stands very straight up, right, then as I push, she only has the distance from her arm, her elbow here, to the middle of her left foot, this far, to actually convert my horizontal push into a vertical component. As she gets lower, okay, then, and I begin to push, it's much easier for her because she's now allowed a considerable distance from here to here for the conversion of the horizontal force into a vertical component. You'll find out that it can be shown mathematically or easily that the best angle finally for the difference between my push and her foot would be 45 degrees from the ground up. And that tends to be the most feasible angle from which to actually use the Pengjing. And a lot of times you can see that, thanks, just a minute, in a martial art itself. If we take that 45-degree angle as the best angle which to propagate force from the incoming horizontal down to the ground, you can see actually it doesn't have to be like a board. It'd be very tough to go around leaning at a 45-degree angle. The human body can actually have curves and twists in it as long as the final resting places, say from the ground to the whatever object you're pushing against, are at 45 degrees. You still have the optimum angle which to propagate that. Now the problem is, of course, if you have a weird structure like this, and the human body in a sense is not the most efficient angle for this. If you get too many angles, such as this one and this here, each angle itself has to be supported with some muscular tension. So the less sharp the angles are, the less force you have to use. So actually, it's easier for Kim to push against me like this, okay, than if she were to bend like this. She can propagate force to me, but now she has to begin to put some strain into her triceps and into the shoulder muscle while she's doing that. All right, so, and if she gets too close to me like this, the amount of force she can deliver, because she's very far off of 45 degrees now, is pronouncedly less. So here is an indication of somebody who's trying to convert either a push into a wall or accepting a push down. It's a little bit less efficient, okay? And if you look at a lot of the taiji forms, you'll see that classically, particularly in the Yang style, there were instances where postures were analyzed just on the basis of appearance. And as a general rule, you'll almost always notice that the back leg angle will be at 45 degrees, and the hand, which is actually transmitting the force is in exactly the same line from the angle of the leg, okay? And here I've drawn a quick picture of someone doing a form which is very high. The angle from his back foot, let's say where he's pushing from, to his hands which are applying the force is closer to 60 degrees at this point in time, and it's easily shown that that particular amount of force that you can generate with that is quite a bit less than somebody in a better posture, okay? All right, so bearing that in mind, I take Kim, I push here, okay, and she has to begin to learn to apply this force. So the first thing that you do when you're testing or checking this out with your friends is you push, hold, allow them to learn to adjust without any strain, okay, and now then go back down the back leg slightly and then right back up into the arm, okay? So a lot of force can be generated, but in this case, she's not using any arm or hand motion. She's going down, she's storing power in her leg and coming back toward me. She can add to that quite a bit by when she goes back down her leg. Now, she's maintaining very good pong, which means she's using almost no muscular effort. She can add to that by bowing her back out very slightly so that when she releases toward me, she releases not only the power in her leg and her hip, but also in her lower back, okay, so she comes back toward me like that, okay, and we get a lot more force generated. So that sort of practice that you can do with doors, your friends, what have you, is quite a lot of help to beginning to develop this prior to just using the forms. Okay, and when she does this, it's very, very critical. Actually, it's pretty critical when you do it. She's pretty good at it, but it's very critical that the shoulders stay very relaxed and the lower back stay very relaxed too. The two most common faults I always see are generally a very tight shoulder, you don't need it, just sort of line it up, and a lower back that should be very relaxed too, okay? And pong itself is what they say, it's very substantial in one direction, okay, but it doesn't do anything in any other direction. It's considered void in all directions except the direction you push into it, taking it to the ground. Pong is the main manifestation or the main power behind what is known as opening strength. So opening is not done with the body pushing out, it's done with the ground power coming through you and pushing out. Okay, so next, let's move on toward the second parameter, connection. Now, connection itself is the complementary side to pong. The two work in conjunction, and the body is constantly flowing between the pong opening the body expansively outward, and then the connection of the body, or in its various aspects, contracting or closing the body. In some senses, the body itself cannot be controlled as a coherent unit without connection being maintained at all times. Let me show you a brief way to begin to work with connection, though. If I take Kim and have her put her right foot forward, and then I push from the back, it's very easy for her to take my push, particularly if I'm not obnoxious about it. And I help a little bit by pushing slightly down to get it started. It's very easy to just take an incoming force and let it go into the ground. All right. If I move up slightly higher on her back, she'll find with very little difficulty that she can also run that easily to the ground. Then, if Kim hyperextends her right arm, and she pushes it way out until I begin to feel the tension set into here. Well, if this tension is reaching all the way back to my fingers where I can feel it, that means then that the front of her hand must be connected back here also. Well, if that's true, then all I have to do is pull on her hand to actually be pushing back here at the same time. So if I go to the front, I can pull on her arm, and technically I'm doing exactly the same thing as pushing on her back. So she has to maintain that slight roll forward or rounding of the back in order for her arm to connect to her back. particularly to the lower part of the back. If I take her arm and I'm pulling it like this, okay, there's no problem because the path that's happening, my pull is going back to about here, which is the same thing as pushing, so now the push is still going down her front leg. If I change into a push, we're back exactly in the same situation in which we were testing and trying to develop Pong strength. So in this case, the push is going through to her shoulder because she's got it slightly rolled forward. It easily goes to her back and then down through her left leg. Okay, so then I can change, I can pull, I can push, I can pull and push, and all Kim has to do is redirect where the forces are going. Every time I pull, she allows my pull to go to here and goes down her front leg. When I push, she allows the ground vector to go through to the back leg. It's critical that she stay relaxed while this is going on, and that the changes from the front leg to the back leg happen in the midsection of her body. She doesn't want to tense, shift, and move her shoulders around. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to control these vectors going through our body. And by looking at the Pong, when I push her, and the connection that she's exhibiting from my pull down to here within her middle, we're able to get a very general sense of how the movements are accomplished. The fact that she's using and changing in her middle will, over a period of time, gradually begin to develop her middle, which is, in a general sense, is which way we're trying to go. Now, this pulling connection of the body is sometimes referred to as pulling silk. And you can see that because everything is slightly extended so that there's very minutely a slight tension connecting the whole body. If I take that form of movement and twist the body, I can begin to get into what is called reeling silk. Now, in reeling silk, one of the interesting things about it, for instance, if Kim twists my arm, okay, and I extend my arm very slightly, and over a period of time, it becomes second nature. When I do that, I can almost relaxedly hold my arm. She can't turn it, and what's happened is the body unit itself kicks in. Instead of, as you normally do, when somebody twists it, people tighten their arm. And this is what we're trying to get around in terms of internal strength. We stay very relaxed and we let the body function as a unit, so when she twists, I have no problem controlling it. That's used in a martial sense in the fact that if I want to twist her arm myself, instead of twisting with local motion like this, I tie it into the middle portion of my body, and then I turn the middle portion of my body. And I don't have to use a lot of strength to do it. The amount of force that I'm able to generate requires quite a bit less muscular effort than normally when I'm using internal strength parameters. Okay, one other thing that we have to look at is bringing the arms down, not just twisting, but a lot of times we have forces that are involved pulling down, in which case the central portion of the body in conjunction with the rest of it, but mainly a lot of the pulling down is done with the body weight going down and a contraction, like an amoeba, let's say, in the middle portion of the body, pulling down. If I stay relaxed when I do that and I sink down, pulling a little bit with the oblique area of the abdomen and with the muscles in the lower part of the, in the small of the back, that way my arms can stay very relaxed, and yet I can generate a lot of force with that connection through the body, okay? And also, this connection of the body allows us to transfer the mass and inertia of the central torso in a lot of our strikes. You can use Pong to generate force out this way. We'll get into that later. But also, when I come down on an object, by just tying it to the middle portion of my body, I generate the power with the middle portion of my body, and it's transferred in a plastic mode into the arms or the legs in some cases, okay? And remember that connection, the full body connection itself, is deemed a part of closing, which we'll go into when we go into the forms more generally. before we get into combining the Pong and connection parameters into a moving form, let's take a look at how they can be used in just a standing form to build up a lot of strength. It's a very interesting aspect of Chinese martial arts in the fact that a lot of strength can be developed in the body by just standing. But let's take a look at the parameters that are necessary to make that standing worthwhile. I've noticed in standing, or very, very slow movement too, that an odd feeling strength develops in people. And this is the sort of strength that a lot of people refer to almost solely as internal strength. Feeling this unusual strength that develops from either standing or moving very, very slowly. The standing itself, if nothing else, will develop a lot of great leg strength. And we'll find that in the internal arts, leg strength is one of the primary requirements because essentially using the body to propagate the ground and your leg strength in a very relaxed manner. So taking a look at connecting the body, first thing, if Kim will stand with her feet about shoulder width apart, the toes just very, very slightly in, not much, and then sink down, bending the knees, okay, and then very gently pull the legs slightly apart. So now there's a very mild tension parameter, which we're going to get rid of pretty much in a moment. Okay, and then secondly, she holds her head up so that she begins to elongate and very slightly put a tensile connection down the spine. She holds the chin in a little bit to help that. Okay, and then thirdly, by taking the two arms out and then extending them so that the shoulders very slightly round forward and the back rounds itself, she can make a connection from her fingertips to her spine, okay? And of course you want to stay relaxed sort of while you're doing this so the lower back itself stays very relaxed, okay? A lot of times I tell people to just pretend you're reading a newspaper on a sofa and you just slump it slightly. Just let it relax, okay, and go back. All right, so now that she has a tension parameter, a very slight one, from her feet through her legs, up through her spine to the top of her head, and then from the spine out to the fingertips. If you don't quite feel it in your fingers, then rotate the hands so that the thumbs go forward, or if you want to, you can turn the palms out and bring the fingers very, very slightly back so that you feel the connection from the tips of the fingers to the back, okay? Once you have that connection and you feel the body connected as a unit and you're well over your feet, so your balance is very good, then you want to relax. Okay, in this case, let's go ahead and turn it back this way. Relax to the point that you feel that connection through the body only very tenuously, okay? And you'll feel the Pong strength that we were talking about a few minutes ago going through the body, so that if I were to impinge, push slightly on the arms, she's able to channel that to the ground, okay? And she already has that slight tension, so she has her body connected. So standing there with this Pong feeling coming up through the ground, through her legs, and out to her arms, to the hairs on her arms, to the top of her head. In other words, filling the body with that Pong strength is how you do your standing, but relax to the point where all feeling of connection almost disappears, but not quite, almost, okay? Now then, that particular standing sort of posture will develop a lot of the very unusual strength which is referred to as internal strength just by itself. There are various postures that you can hold using this connection and the Pong strength to develop for various reasons, okay? One, okay, in a sense, you could say this is an open posture, in the sense that she's generally letting Pong come up and hold her arms out slightly, and then she's just relaxed. In other words, this could be open. An example that's well known in taiji would be, say, single whip, okay? In single whip, however you hold it within your particular style, you essentially are opening the body out and allowing the Pong to come up through the legs and spread out, okay? So this is an open posture. Okay, there are examples of closed postures. You could go to a great extreme posture, which is sometimes done for martial training, which may look like this, Okay, see where everything is wound and pulled closed. Okay, this would be an extreme closed posture. Or in taiji itself, you may have postures which involve closing, squeezing the body closed. In this case, you feel the body contract very much like a clamshell. Even along its longitudinal axis, you'll feel the back bow closed, the arms pull in closed, and the legs, in some cases, you can actually pull the leg in and close like this. And this, you can hold a posture like this, and your closing power isometrically will be developed quite a bit. Okay? A lot of the martial postures involve either open or closed positions. In some case, you may want to practice holding a martial posture. For instance, I can hold a posture that looks like this, in which case I direct my major portion of my Fang energy to this area of my arm and imagine something impinging on it, and I relax very much and just sink it down and practice this until the point a lot of strength builds up there. Okay? Now then, some of the taiji aspects or the standing posture aspects also have a lot to do with health. It's said that certain postures and certain angles allowing the Fang to go through in certain ways stimulate acupuncture points and meridians. Okay? That's a study in itself, and we won't go into it other than to mention that standing postures seem to affect that quite well. Even the sister martial arts, such as Xingyi, Bagua, involve postures which essentially have to do with propagating Fang strength through the body, and yet the body remains very connected. In Xingyi, let's say in Pichuan, a lot of times the posture is held to build up strength, because when the actual striking is done in something like that, you want to have a lot of power there. You can build that power that you're going to release just by standing in a posture that propagates Fang to the hands or wherever you need it to be at that particular time. Bagua walking itself happens to be very closely related to standing postures in the sense that Fang and connection are used, but these things are actually held while walking to build up that strength. Okay, so there's a great relationship between all the internal martial arts, and standing in its various formats contributes quite a bit to the power that's generated and developed in the internal martial arts. Of course, after standing and the strengths that it can develop, we can now go into the movement of forms. For movement to be quite good in forms, you need to develop several strengths in your body. Of course, paramount of the strengths that you need to develop and become very comfortable in using is the feeling of Fang through the body and the connection. Okay. Secondly, if you want to reach into higher and higher levels, you have to increase your leg strength and your waist strength, the ability to move and turn the connected body. For instance, when the waist turns, it actually twists the body very much in the way that, say, a towel is used. If you take the towel and you want to turn the top portion of it, you can turn the top portion of it by turning the body, or the bottom part of it, okay? So, and the same thing happens with the body itself. When you turn the upper part of the body, you need to have some leg and waist strength to be able to turn it, not do it locally. And so this turning and directing of Fang and the connection through the body is done with the waist. We'll go into that more in just a few moments, okay? But as you do these forms or any of these movements, you don't force them. You're trying to learn to move your body in a different manner. And to do that means that you have to repattern all that muscular coordination you've developed since you were a child. So you have to learn very, very slowly to move the correct way. In the internal arts, the internal strength forms, It's not the particular movement that you do that's important, it's how you move the body. And this movement that we're going to be going through has to be continuous through the body. It constantly rolls and twists through the body. We'll make it smaller and smaller as we go along, without any gaps or deficiencies at all. The pong strength and the connection are always there. We don't make a movement like this and then suddenly do something isolated. The movement of the body as a unit is continuous all the way through. Now, we'll be learning this with some exaggeration. Okay, now in that case, we may make a movement that looks like this. Okay, there's an exaggeration there, and actually, technically, there's a waste of energy in the fact that I move my whole torso just to move my arm. As you get better and better in controlling the direction of pong through your body with connection and the driving of pong, movements become smaller and smaller, but it always helps to start out larger, work your way down to smaller movements. Ideally, you get to the point where a motion may start like this. As you get better, it'll be smaller, but you get to the point where there's almost no real external motion of the body. It's pretty much been moved so that the muscular movements themselves are there, but they're on such a small level that it looks, they say the body becomes more formless, and yet it generates power. This is where we want to go. Now, this directing of the pong strength through the body is what we'll be pretty much concentrating on. Pong is pushed through the body, starting from the ground up. Okay, so I push and let it ripple up through the body. The rippling of the body is controlled quite largely by the very natural lay of the muscles, the tendons, and the ligaments through the body in conjunction with the skeletal system itself. So in that case, the movement in an internal strength form is referred to as natural. In other words, you don't fight any movement of the body. For instance, I can take my hand, to turn my hand over by the fact that I leave my hand exactly where it is, and I pull away from it, my hand will flip over, okay? Okay, in that case, we're utilizing a natural phenomenon within the body, the way that the muscles and tendons lie. So many of the movements, all of them really, within a taiji form should be controlled by natural movement of the body, okay? All right, this is carried to such an extent that there's a saying that you maintain what's called the 3 external harmonies. In this case, they're referring to the hip and the shoulder, the knee and the elbow, and the foot and the hand. In a motion, for instance, where I come up to within a form, let's say repulse monkey, I can do it in a very convoluted sense so that you might see this. But if you watch the coordinated movement of the sides of the body, okay, see how a motion is coordinated between the shoulder and the hip, the elbow and the knee, and the hand and the foot. Sometimes there's a cross coordination, but this coordination of the body through its length structure is mentioned quite a bit in the classics of the taiji annals. When you move, the connection of the body and the pong, of course, is paramount, but there are side factors like breath that you need to watch too. Any opening movement tends to be accompanied by an inhale, whereas a closing movement is always augmented by a exhale, and a contraction of the body, of course, accompanies the closing itself of the body. If we take a motion and run it through its full length, letting it unwind like I did a moment ago, watch how I use not only the pong pushing through the body like this, but also I can make the body twist up its entire length. Again, remember, I start, if I want to make a movement at the top of this towel, I can actually twist the bottom, and I don't have to worry. Sooner or later, it expresses itself at the top. Okay, and so we want to do that with the body. In the same way, I can begin a bang push through my body accompanied by a twist and let the body unravel or twist as it goes along with it. Okay, so we go. You can see that move through the body. Just leaving it mildly extended and start the movement at the bottom, you'll see it ripple through the body. Again, this is an exaggeration. Later, you may just kind of let it go through the body quite rapidly. But you have to learn like this using the direction of the pong and the winding, twisting connection throughout the body to develop that sort of motion. When you do these motions, remember when I had Kim working with me, and I did the push and the pull on her, I stressed the fact that the changes that she manipulated through her body from the push and the pull took place in the middle portion of the body. This is very critical that the major source of power, change, or direction take place in the middle. This happens in all movements in the form to the extent that you begin to look at the body as a long ribbon of linked strength, which is, for the most part, coordinated and moved by the middle portion of the torso, in the body. So as these movements become more and more developed within you from doing the form, you'll find that your middle will actually get very strong, and the musculature sometimes, in a lot of people, develops a very pronounced ball-like aspect. Okay? When you finish with learning a form and you practice and you develop these strengths, this way of carrying yourself, of course, I need to say, has to be augmented if you want to go on to martial applications. If you want to really begin to use this martially, and not just for the day-to-day strength or for your own health and so forth, you'll have to begin to do supplemental auxiliary exercises. For instance, hitting something, taking a form, for instance, in Yang style. They have the Yang form is fine for teaching the strength and the health, but if you're going to use it martially, you begin to do secondary supplemental movements which boost up your power to deliver Bangjing. Okay? All right, but we'll be getting into that. What I'm going to do is cover a series of movements that we can look at that are common to the forms that I talked about at the beginning of the video. And we'll take a look at them going from the general movement itself, and the way it's done correctly to develop the strength, to the point where we begin to make our motions a little bit smaller, with the ideal in mind that really what you want to get to is that formlessness. The body is trained to use the middle and the ground strength to the point that with almost no motion, a lot of power is developed. All right, so we'll begin to move in that direction. There are several moves that I want to go over. The general idea of these moves that I've picked out a little bit has to do with interest, but more primarily, these movements within themselves contain most of the motions that are actually normally done by the body using the Pong and connection principles in taiji. Most of the classical admonitions in terms of how the body is held, or the basic parameters in which you do to perform a form, are self-correcting if you maintain good Pong and connection through the body. So generally, when you fill your body with Pong and connect it slightly, and you maintain that through a series of movements, you will fulfill most of the requirements without any real problem. Some of the requirements which involve some of the leg functions, the way they're held, and so forth, will be extra that you have to put in, but generally speaking, none of them will break any of the normal setup that your body has to do to use Pong and connection. Okay? Of the movements that I want to take a look at, remember that throughout the form, I will be using bang in connection, and the stress will always go from bang to connection. In other words, it will go from open to close. A Tai Chi form in itself is a constant series of open, close, open, close, open, close. There's no other real way to do it. So there's no held posture and a movement. There's always a close, open, close, open format. Just bear that in mind. The first movement is the one pretty much that we were looking at a minute or two ago, in the sense that the body is driving bang from this area of my right foot in, let's say, a roughly 45-degree angle toward some application with my left hand. In this case, I can just push bang. In other words, if somebody were holding their hand on my shoulder, I could use that ground vector through my body to move them. Okay? And I want to move them in a way that uses the least muscular effort. That's almost always how you tell get bang. It's the posture which uses the ground strength in the most effective way, that is with almost no muscular effort. So I can push bang through my body in this direction, and of course I'm going to add to it a little bit of the winding function, in the sense that not only do I push, but I begin to twist through my body and close down. Now that particular motion is very easy to accomplish. Just follow what I'm doing a couple of times. Maintain the slight connection of bang through your body, twist and push, slightly upward, and then relax down. And for the moment, just come down in the middle. It doesn't matter that much. Okay, sort of come down, put your weight back on the right leg. So you go. Open, close. Open, close. Close further, open, close. Close further, open, close. Okay, very easy motion. You can do it, instead of doing it in one direction, you can do it in two directions, in the sense that you can bring the opening up through your middle, out, close down. So I look like this. Okay, see, so here's my extreme close. I begin to push bang up through my body. Because the shoulders are slightly hyperextended, the fact that my back begins to bow slightly will lift the arms up. See, now they're still out. And then I pull down by bringing this portion of my body down. So I try not to move the arms separately. I control everything with the rippling roll of the middle of my torso. I don't at any time want to bring my shoulders up like this. This is the most common mistake you'll see in this sort of movement. So leave the shoulders where they are, but slightly roll forward. This particular motion, or the slant version, the one-sided version that we just did, basically contains in it almost every motion that you can make in a taiji form, because you have this close, store in my back, open, close, see the store, open, close, go down, push into your back. But see, when I push into the back, I don't let the height of my torso change, so I begin to store power in my back along the spine, and then I let it express itself going up and out. Okay, so I go inhale, exhale. Okay, open, close. Okay, up, down. I can do it with a slant the same way. I'm down, I go up, down, left, right. So this constant changing back and forth between two basic sets, either up, down, left, right, open, close. This constant series of change is that which gives the taiji, the symbol, the yin-yang symbol, aspect to Tai Chi, and this is generally where it gets its name from. Okay? So we've got essentially here a basic move, a slanted movement, a movement which sort of combines that but in two situations. Okay? And I want to go to a slightly different one now, one that everybody knows called wave hands like clouds. The initial application of wave, or the first application that I know of in wave hands like clouds was originally the fact that it was derived from an earlier Shaolin technique, which is still quite common, in the sense that you enter into an opponent. Let's say there's an opponent here, like this, and then kick. Okay, so if I were to practice this in sequence, I could have this take his arms, move them to the side while I get closer, kick. Take his arms, move them to the side, kick. All right, this has been stylized, okay, taking it, first of all, in the Chin version. Okay, like that. As we develop on into the Yang form, we get to the point where you see a little bit more stylization of the movement. Okay, but you can see they're related, and of course, whatever variants that you have through the different forms, you may see it smaller and so forth, but that was the evolution of that particular move. But in this case, essentially we have that slant motion itself, all right, then we have a closing of the body, and an opening, a close and an opening, all right. When you're doing this form of motion, you have to maintain bang through your body at all times and the connection of the body that goes along with it. So when you do wave hands like clouds, it's critical that you move holding bang in your body. Any motion, in this case, let's say a hand moves this way, it doesn't move by itself. Or if a hand is moving, if your power is in this upper arm, it's substantial, it stays with the body. The waist actually turns it. Okay? Okay? As we go through it. Even the legs, as they're moved, the legs are not moved by the isolated motion of the leg muscles themselves. The legs are moved very much by the body as a whole. In other words, if I take a motion where I use my elbow and leg in a scissors-like manner and bring them together, like that, the power to the scissoring is done by the central portion of the body contracting. Okay? I can lift the leg instead of lifting a leg like this. I can use the center portion of the body, bring it together, or I can leave the arm out of it and lift the leg with the central portion of the body. Try moving a leg like that. All right, so when I move sideways, and let's do it in the Chin format for a moment. First of all, for the leg to get from where it was to here, it's just me moving my body. All right, and then when my body turns, it will bring the right leg behind. All right, and then if I let my control shift to the left leg, I can now bring it across. So in a motion like that, in a robotic sense, that's how the motion goes. So this assuming control of the extremities with the middle is a critical function of the internal martial arts. All right, so try that, bearing in mind what the application was, and you begin to get a real feel for how Tai Chi should be practiced. Okay? In that same sense, with the leg being moved by the body, I can actually move it quite well with the waist closing like this. I can add the twist to the body and begin to move the leg around like that. The motion of the movement, which is called lotus kick, is done essentially with the body closing and the twist of the body, bringing it up and around. And the only reason I use that as an example is so you begin to see, even to any real extent, the control itself is not done with the local muscles. You have to maintain the body connection to carry it through. Okay? Another move, which is quite common to the various forms, is bend bow to shoot tiger. In the original Chen-style application of that, as one of the closing moves, this is a fairly aggressive attack in the sense that the body is connected. It sinks down. A store, again, is made in the back. And then it's released after building up to a certain level. This sort of quick release of power is something we'll go into in just a moment in terms of some quick fudging. But all of these motions come out of the basic movements we're talking about, which is moving the body as a unit, keeping bang and connection, not losing it, keeping it very continuous, and staying very relaxed at the same time. Because you have to repattern this. If you want the body to act as a unit, you can't afford to isolate anything. If you isolate the arms, you really will never have the relaxed ability to put out a lot of power. Okay, so as you practice these motions, stay very relaxed, very connected. Pretend you're moving through a viscous medium like molasses, and that will help you use the whole body to develop as a unit. Okay? And there's a difference in your motions between moving, holding pang, and moving the body with and by means of bang. So don't stop at the first level. Continue on until you get your whole body working as a unit. Okay? So let's move on a little bit. Now, once the movement of the body begins to pick up some coordination and strength and connection from doing it over a period of time, and it does take time to do that, you may want to go on to a little bit of the next level of using pang jing, this ground vector, in an attack mode. Now, pang, the pang strength, is referred to as a jing, as I said. And in this case, jing translates more as a vector than another type of jing that's often referred to in the classics. If I use jing to attack, and the word for attack is fa, then we have fa jing, and that's essentially where you get the magic term fa jing, or discharge power, release energy, so forth. In the fact that your body tends to be very relaxed, very soft, and of course, but the pang strength is in there, and it can be, depending on whether you neutralize or yield in front of a what, but it can be, as they say, like pushing on a mountain for somebody to manifest jing. To attack from this very soft pose, this sudden flicking of jing, is where they get the needle in the cotton idea. So it's like you're soft, but this needle of jing suddenly appears attacking, and that's where that comes from. Or sometimes you hear it referred to in the classics as opening and closing in an instant, okay? So this very slight instant that it takes to open and close and release a lot of power is sought after a lot. But it's not, you've got to realize that fa jing in itself is not the main benefit that taiji promotes for you. But let's go ahead and take a quick look at it. Pang is very, very strong. You could see that when I was pushing on Kim. And this storing in the body, we were using the back. In a sense, if you look at the body as a transmitter of the ground's force up and through you, which you're holding in a very relaxed way, okay, and you can even move mobily with this, you can look at that whole length strength. Now, along that length, if I wanted to hit somebody in the nose, I could do a cute little trick and hold my fist and store up energy behind it, my arm, and suddenly go, oh, like that, and hit them. Well, the question comes in taiji, xingyi, bagua, what have you. Why use this small appendage when you can use the real thick musculature which is associated with the middle? So in our case, basically, to store and release, why, instead of using the arms, why not just go ahead, sink down, store in the back, here, I'll do it like this, and then let it go straight up the best bung path and express itself. And so in the form, there are various places where, as you get further and further advanced, you may want to begin to release jing like that. You have to realize that the first portion of your time is not spent in developing dramatic jing. It's learning to re-coordinate the body. That's more important than releasing the jing. As you get better and better, and the motions become natural to you, you'll find that releasing jing is fairly easy to do. You don't want to make it a lifelong study, though, of just releasing jing. You can get into what they call silly fi jing, where you're just doing that as a sort of a maniacal demonstration of your great power. We don't want to get into that. The short power, the ability, since the body is so strong, this releasing can be done very close, and that's why Tai Chi itself is a very close-in fighting sort of system. The fact that you can release power through, say, your shoulder, elbow, hands, and a lot of power in a very short range is one of the things that is the hallmark that differentiates the internal arts from the external. Okay, and so when you learn your form, to be able to release through your shoulder or whatever implies that the body is held very loosely. So remember that, and don't get into local tenseness at all while you're doing that. Okay, don't get where you're using any pushes or this, that, and the other with the arm. Try to train the middle first, okay, and then let the additive bows, as they call them, begin to come in. The bows being essentially the major bow being the back bow, which bows and then releases straight up the pang path. Then the secondary ones are the leg and the arm bows, okay? When you want to practice in the Chen form, the best posture I know to practice the release of Fa Jing has to do with the hidden hand punch, where you're down, relaxed, stored on your right leg, okay, without moving the torso and keeping the weight on the back leg for the moment. Push into your back, and I'll turn so you can see that. Push into your back, and then go forward, releasing that power for the moment on a very clean pung pass, so it looks something like this. The main movement, though, is no different than the ones that you've been making in the form itself, where there's that constant go down, store, release. In this case, it's just done more and more quickly, and probably the greatest help to doing it quickly is the ability to push the store into the back and let it accumulate until it almost releases itself. Okay, so there are many additive things that go along with Fa Jing, but these basics of storing along the length of your pang, pushing into your back here, releasing while you're going forward and maybe turning, dropping your weight, whatever additive vectors you use, will get you going in the right direction. To go further, you'll probably need somebody to help you in person, okay? Whenever you strike, because you're using the ground strength through your body path, you don't want to break that, okay, by suddenly shifting to isolated motion. If I have a ground path coming from my hand through my shoulders, which slightly roll forward, down my back, and then let's say down my right leg in this case, when I get ready to express that, I don't want to break that ribbon of bang jing. Okay, so if you have a motion like this, and suddenly, now watch my shoulder here, and suddenly I go, the moment I move my shoulder, I break the ground path. And so I stop that wave of power going through it, and suddenly my power depends strictly on how much strength I have in my shoulder. And I see this quite commonly in people trying to express Jing. They'll be going fine, but then they'll suddenly, they'll break the path, and that certainly robs you of power, so be very careful of that. The fact that I've got this link strength, which is like a ribbon, okay, and I have my middle, which mine is fairly strong from experience, suddenly storing up and releasing, shaking, and there's a wave of momentum associated with that because there's a lot of mass here, okay, and there's a certain amount of acceleration and speed with which I release this after a lot of practice and time. So this mass times its velocity, because it's connected by bong through to my hand, which has much less mass. If I hold it loosely connected and let that go through, the small mass trying to take on that momentum picks up tremendous speed. So when you're striking in short power in the internal arts, it's more like a missile lands on somebody, because you can be very close to somebody and release a lot of power, as opposed to in the external arts where you basically launch something at them. Okay, it's not to be confused with the amount of momentum that you transfer in the internal arts. Okay, and as you get better and better and higher level, the ideal is to be able to release these things with almost no motion. This was a small motion where I'm here, but ideally the motion goes to where it's almost unable to be discerned, and you reach that state of formlessness where you don't need a form to train the body anymore. Okay, so let's move on. It's easy when learning to do a taiji form, xingyi, bagua, whatever, to get mired down in detail and sometimes ritual, mysticism, what have you. I'm trying to keep the thrust of this discussion along the lines that you can see that the parameters are reasonably simple that it takes to affect some changes in your body and your life in terms of the taiji forms themselves. We've gone over the basics of the bong and the connection, and really if these things are satisfied, you'll find that many of the little small minutiae take care of themselves. For instance, a very common thing that I see is for instance, in brush knee and twist step, I've seen instructors that will run around and they move 2 centimeters this way, and then they move them this way, and they move the hips and the whole deal. And it's very confusing to a student, and believe me, I've been there many times myself, to have these little things done, because they're usually not reproducible at a later time. I mean, you can't put yourself exactly back where they moved you. You don't understand, and you tend to defer to somebody's superior knowledge or experience, what have you. Generally speaking, for instance, in this brush knee and twist step in the yang style, whether the foot is turned this way, or the front one, or the hand is here, this, that, and the other, you want to move the hand where if somebody were to push into it, into the palm, you would be in that position which would allow the bong strength to come through to the hand and take that push to the ground, and the easiest path which uses the least amount of muscular effort. When you find that position, you will have found the correct posture. And of course, that depends upon your own body height, your body weight, the strength of your legs, the height of your opponent, and so forth. So in terms of finding an ideal posture which is totally applicable for everybody, there's no way you can do that. Use common sense. Just always find that path, whether the foot's turned a certain way or not. You have your own parameters that you have to satisfy. But find that path which most easily takes force to the ground. If that's true, it's also the same path from which you can exert the most force using the body. Okay? So bear that in mind constantly while you're doing that. When you're doing the form, you begin to use and apply bong and connection in a way which, although martially quite applicable, how many of us are going to be doing martial applications? know, as a general rule, our day-to-day life doesn't involve fighting or being in the ring. So what you want to do is begin to develop the waist and the Pong strength and connection so that you can use these things in day-to-day life, whether it's lifting something into a cupboard, pulling open a door, again using the middle or what have you, but not necessarily in a jing release, but the slow release of force, a pushing, a picking something up. Again, here in this case, like I was doing a few minutes ago, the shoulders are hyperextended. If I lift something, I want my arms tied as directly to the spine as possible to lift something. So this is very, very useful in our day-to-day life. The development of this strength takes an amount of time and relaxation, quite a bit of softness to repattern this so that it's functional. Your Qigongs and so forth that you use as supplements to maybe your taiji will be enhanced quite a bit by this form of movement. Okay? And although it does take some time to do it, this doesn't take 20 years or 40 years. You can learn these things in quite a bit less time. I think one of the anecdotes that I liked the most was the encouragement to go ahead and continue, because with good teaching, from absolute beginner to a mastery, not being the world champion or anything, but a mastery of the subject, shouldn't take much more than about 10 years. The people who are going with the 20 and the 40 years, that usually is an indication that they haven't had access over the long term to very good teaching, and that's okay because we're still young in our practice of taiji in the United States. I did want to do a little bit more on qi and qigongs, but I thought about it. First of all, it's very difficult to discuss those things on video without having the ability to personally watch somebody's reactions and guide them through that. Secondly, my own accomplishment in that's only moderate, so it's probably not fair to expound upon that in a sage-like fashion without having the ability to really say that I have a mastery of it. There are people in the United States who are quite good at it, and I think you should look for those if you want to improve in the way of qigongs. Some of the adjunctive skills which you read about in the classics came from hard work. You know, for instance, if you read the Yang family anecdotes, indications of Yang Luchan teaching Yang Banho and Yang Qinho, his sons, making them do their forms under a table and so forth, working them so hard that they ran away from home. In Chen Village, a lot of the lineal descendants were exempted from the daily chores in the field so that they could practice many hours a day. So to reach martial levels takes a lot of practice. Okay, it's not something you can do 15 minutes a day and you have these godlike powers. Okay, some of the other skills, such as the protective mechanisms or conditioning exercises like, gungs, like golden bell or iron shirt, actually are practiced as an aside from the taiji form. These are conditioning qigongs, if you will, which require a separate training and knowledge of to accomplish. So to do these taiji forms and expect to have golden belt or iron shirt, it's expecting a little bit much. What you can expect is very, very strong day-to-day power, because you're working with a highly, highly efficient mechanical method of using the body. Okay. As a matter of fact, some of the teachers speak in terms of force vectors and so forth. It's nothing new, nothing that I've come up with. This is extremely good for your health. The hobby interests which keep you practicing force good health on you, and not to mention the qigong addition to your health. Okay, but again, can't get into that. If you're going to go martially, this is an extremely interesting way of doing it, and it's just I've been wrapped up in it for a long period of time. I hope you share that same enthusiasm. And of course, other than the daily strength and so forth, that interest is something that takes a lot of stress away. Okay, so basically all I'm saying is realize that this is fairly simple. Work at it. Stay very relaxed. Begin to accomplish and use Pong. The results in this are up to you. Work hard and enjoy it. Good luck.